Jake Morrison wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform as he walked through the massive corridors of Station Omega-7. The walls stretched high above his head, built for creatures much larger than humans. Everything here was designed for aliens, and Jake felt very small. He had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Getting into the Galactic Defense Academy was nearly impossible for humans. Only 3 humans made it this year out of thousands who applied. Jake still could not believe he was really here. The other cadets moved around him like a living rainbow of strange colors and shapes. Some walked on 4 legs, others floated in the air. A few had scales that glittered under the bright lights. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. Back on Earth, he had only seen aliens in videos and pictures. A massive creature with blue skin and 6 arms bumped into Jake as it passed. The alien looked down at him with 4 yellow eyes and made a sound like grinding metal. Jake quickly stepped aside and mumbled an apology. The alien kept walking without acknowledging him. Jake checked his watch. The combat simulation would start in 20 minutes. His stomach felt like it was full of jumping insects. He had trained for this his whole life, but training on Earth was very different from training with aliens who could crush him with one hand. He found his way to the preparation room where other cadets were getting ready. The room buzzed with strange languages and sounds. Jake recognized a few words from his alien language classes, but most of it sounded like noise to him. Near the weapon racks, Jake spotted the other 2 humans in his class. Lisa Park was checking her plasma rifle with the focused attention she brought to everything. Danny Rodriguez was talking quietly with a tall, thin alien that looked like it was made of crystal. Jake walked over to them, grateful to see familiar faces. Lisa looked up as he approached and gave him a small smile. "Nervous?" she asked. "A little," Jake admitted. "You?" "Terrified," Danny said, joining their conversation. "Did you see the size of some of these guys? That one over there could probably eat me for lunch." He pointed to a creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall. Its body was covered in thick gray hide that looked like armor. Red eyes glowed in its massive head, and when it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. "That is a Vorthak warrior," said the crystal alien Danny had been talking to. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "They are bred for battle. Their hide can stop most energy weapons." Jake felt his confidence drop even lower. How was he supposed to compete with creatures like that? Humans were soft and weak compared to most alien species. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. "Do not worry too much," the crystal alien continued. "The simulation weapons are set to cause pain, not real damage. Even if you are hit, you will not be permanently hurt." "Thanks," Jake said, though he did not feel much better. Pain was still pain. A loud voice echoed through the room, speaking in the common galactic language. Jake's translator earpiece turned the words into English. "All cadets report to the main briefing hall. Simulation begins in 10 minutes. The room emptied quickly as cadets filed out. Jake followed the crowd, his heart beating faster with each step. The briefing hall was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that rose toward the ceiling. Jake and the other humans found seats near the middle, surrounded by aliens of every shape and size imaginable. At the front of the hall, a creature that looked like a giant insect stood behind a podium. It had 4 arms, a hard shell covering its body and large compound eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. Scars crisscrossed its shell, telling stories of many battles. "I am Commander Vexthal," the creature said. Its voice was sharp and clicking. "Today you will face your first combat simulation. This test will measure your reflexes, your tactical thinking, and your ability to handle pain and stress." The commander's eyes seemed to focus on the human section for a moment. Jake felt like the alien was looking directly at him. "The weapons you will use are modified plasma rifles. They deliver energy bursts that cause intense pain, but no permanent damage. If you are hit in a vital area, your suit will register the hit and remove you from the simulation. If you cannot continue due to pain, activate your emergency beacon." Jake swallowed hard. He had never been shot with a plasma rifle before, even a training one. The thought made his skin crawl. "You will be divided into teams of mixed species. The objective is simple: capture and hold the central control point for 15 minutes. The team that succeeds will receive the highest marks. Those who perform poorly will receive additional training. The way the commander said additional training made it sound like a threat. Remember, Commander Vexthal continued, this is not a game. In real combat, your teammates will depend on you. If you fail here, you may fail them when lives are at stake. Do not disappoint me. Team assignments appeared on screens around the hall. Jake found his name listed with 4 other cadets. Zexcala, a Draknari with thick scales, Findus, a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish, Volthar, one of the massive Vorthak warriors, and Yuki Nem, a small, quick alien with large ears and gray fur. Jake met his team near the equipment area. Zexcala looked him up and down with obvious doubt in her reptilian eyes. You are the human, she said. It was not a question. I have heard your species is very fragile. Try not to slow us down. Jake felt his face grow hot with embarrassment and anger, but he kept his mouth shut. He would prove himself in the simulation. The team received their weapons and equipment. The plasma rifle felt heavier than Jake expected, but he had trained with similar weapons on Earth. The armor was lighter than human military gear, designed more for mobility than protection. They entered the simulation chamber, which looked like a small city. Buildings rose on all sides, connected by walkways and bridges. The control point was a tall tower in the center, marked by a pulsing blue light. Strategy meeting, Volthar rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. I will advance directly. My hide can absorb several hits. The rest of you provide cover and flanking support. Bad plan, Yuki Nem squeaked. Other teams will expect that. We should move quietly, use stealth. Humans are not good at stealth, Zexcala said, looking at Jake again. Maybe he should stay back and provide covering fire. Jake wanted to argue, but a horn sounded, signaling the start of the simulation. Red lights flashed, and suddenly the chamber was filled with the sounds of battle from other areas. The team moved out, with Volthar taking point and the others following. They made it 2 blocks before they encountered their first enemy team. Plasma bolts filled the air, lighting up the artificial twilight with bright flashes. In the chaos of the firefight, Jake became separated from his team. He found himself alone in a narrow alley between 2 buildings. His communicator crackled, with static and urgent voices, but he could not make out the words clearly. He heard footsteps approaching from both ends of the alley. Jake pressed himself against the wall and checked his weapon. The power cell showed full charge, and the safety was off. His hands were shaking slightly, but his grip was steady. 2 Vorthak warriors appeared at the far end of the alley, their massive forms blocking most of the light. They moved with the confidence of predators who had found easy prey. Their plasma rifles were already charging, making a high-pitched whining sound that made Jake's teeth ache. Jake raised his weapon, knowing he was probably about to fail his first day at the academy. But he was not going to go down without a fight. The 2 Vorthak warriors moved closer to Jake, their heavy footsteps echoing in the narrow alley. Each step they took made small vibrations that Jake could feel through the ground. Their red eyes glowed in the dim light, and their massive bodies cast long shadows that seemed to swallow everything around them. Jake pressed his back against the cold metal wall and tried to steady his breathing. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure the aliens could hear it. The plasma rifles in their hands continued to make that terrible whining sound as they charged up to full power. The larger of the 2 Vorthak spoke to his companion in their own language. It sounded like rocks grinding together. Jake's translator struggled with the words, but he caught enough to understand they were discussing how easy this would be. They thought he would surrender without a fight. Jake tightened his grip on his weapon. His palms were sweating inside his gloves, making it harder to hold steady. He had never been in real combat before, not even training this intense. The simulations back on Earth had been with other humans who moved and thought like he did. These creatures were something completely different. The Vorthak raised their rifles and took aim. Jake knew he had maybe 2 seconds before they fired. He could try to dive for cover behind a piece of debris, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow space. He could try to shoot first, but his hands were shaking too much for a good shot. Time seemed to slow down as Jake watched the energy building in their weapons. The blue glow grew brighter and brighter. He could see his reflection in their red eyes, small and scared and very human. The first plasma bolt came from the Vorthak on the left. It was a perfect shot, aimed directly at Jake's chest where it would cause maximum pain and trigger his emergency systems. The bolt moved faster than Jake could react, a streak of blue energy that lit up the entire alley. The impact hit Jake like being punched by a giant fist made of fire. The energy spread across his chest in a wave of burning pain that made every nerve in his body scream. His training armor absorbed some of the energy, but most of it went straight through to his skin and muscles underneath. Jake felt himself stumble, backward. His legs went weak and his vision blurred for a moment. The pain was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt like someone had pressed a red-hot iron against his chest and was holding it there. The smell of burned fabric and singed hair filled his nose. The two Vorthak lowered their weapons and waited. In their experience, any creature hit by a direct plasma burst would collapse immediately. Most species would be writhing on the ground, screaming for medical help. Some would lose consciousness from the shock. The emergency beacon should have activated by now, signaling that this cadet was out of the simulation. Jake took a deep breath and looked down at his chest. There was a black scorch mark on his armor where the energy had hit. Smoke was still rising from the burned material. He could see the edges of the hole where the plasma had burned through to his uniform underneath. He looked back up at the two Vorthak warriors. They were staring at him with confusion in their red eyes. Their massive heads tilted to one side, like confused dogs. "Well," Jake said, his voice a little shaky but still steady. "That stings a bit." The Vorthak exchanged glances. In their own language, one asked the other if the weapon had malfunctioned. The other checked his rifle and confirmed it was working perfectly. They had never seen anything like this before. Jake used their moment of confusion to his advantage. The way his father had taught him to handle pain from years of football practice came back to him. Pain was just a signal, his dad always said. You could choose how much attention to pay to it. He raised his plasma rifle and took aim at the larger Vorthak. His hands were steadier now, the initial shock wearing off into a dull ache that he could push to the back of his mind. The alien was so surprised that he was still standing that he had not raised his own weapon to fire again. Jake pulled the trigger. His shot caught the Vorthak in the shoulder, spinning the massive creature around. The alien roared in pain and anger, a sound like a landslide. His rifle clattered to the ground as he grabbed his wounded shoulder. The second Vorthak snapped out of his surprise and tried to bring his weapon up for another shot. But Jake was already moving, using the narrow space of the alley to his advantage. He was smaller and faster than the aliens, able to duck and weave between the debris that cluttered the ground. Jake fired again, this time hitting the second Vorthak in the leg. The creature stumbled and went down on one knee, his shot going wide and hitting the wall above Jake's head. Chunks of metal and sparks rained down, but Jake kept moving. In the observation deck high above the simulation chamber, instructors from dozens of different species watched in amazement. Commander Vex Thal leaned forward in his chair, his compound, eyes focusing intently on the human cadet below. "Replay that sequence," he ordered his aide. The holographic display showed Jake taking the direct hit again in slow motion. The energy readings showed it was a perfect shot with full power. Any normal cadet should have been eliminated from the exercise immediately. "Is there something wrong with his emergency beacon?" asked Dr. Yith Salas, the medical officer. Her translucent features showed deep concern. "No," replied the technician, monitoring the systems. "All his equipment is functioning normally. His vital signs show he is in pain, but he is choosing to continue fighting." "Impossible," said Professor Keth Rule, an expert on alien biology. "No species can simply ignore that level of neural trauma." Commander Vex Thal clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Apparently, at least one species can." Back in the alley, Jake had managed to eliminate both Vorthak warriors. Their training suits had registered enough hits to remove them from the simulation. They sat on the ground, nursing their simulated wounds and staring at the human who had somehow defeated them. "How?" the larger one asked in broken common language. "How you still fight?" Jake shrugged, trying to look more confident than he felt. The pain in his chest was still there, a constant burning reminder of the hit he had taken. It hurts, but pain does not make me stop. My species learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to keep going, even when it hurts. The Vorthak warriors looked at each other with something that might have been respect. In their culture, the ability to endure pain was highly valued. They had never encountered a species that could match their own tolerance for combat trauma. Jake activated his communicator and tried to reconnect with his team. The static had cleared, and he could hear Volthar's voice calling for him. "Jake, where are you? We need support at the control point." "On my way," Jake replied. He looked down at the scorch mark on his chest one more time. The pain had settled into a steady ache that he could work around. It was not pleasant, but it was not going to stop him either. As he made his way through the simulation city toward the control point, Jake passed other cadets who were hiding behind cover or tending to minor wounds. A few alien medics were helping, cadets who had been eliminated from the exercise. Most of them had taken hits similar to what Jake had absorbed. Word was already spreading through the communication networks. Other teams had heard about the human who took a direct plasma hit and kept fighting. Some thought it was a malfunction in the simulation system. Others wondered if humans had some kind of secret enhancement technology. Jake reached the control point just as his team was preparing for a final assault. Zexkala saw him approaching and did a double take when she noticed the burn mark on his armor. "You were hit," she said, stating the obvious. "Yes," Jake replied simply. "But you are still here." "Yes." Zexkala studied him with new interest. Her reptilian features showed confusion and perhaps a hint of respect. She had been hit by training weapons before and knew how much they hurt. The final phase of the simulation was about to begin. Jake checked his weapon and prepared to prove that. His first victory had not been luck. By the time Jake returned to his dormitory that evening, the entire academy was buzzing with talk about what had happened in the simulation. The story had grown with each telling, and Jake found himself the center of attention in a way that made him very uncomfortable. He sat on his small bed and carefully peeled off his training armor. The scorch mark had burned through 3 layers of protective material, leaving a perfect circle of charred fabric. His skin underneath was red and tender, like a bad sunburn, but nothing that would not heal in a few days. Danny Rodriguez burst through the door with excitement written all over his face. Behind him came Lisa Park, who looked much more concerned than excited. "Jake, everyone is talking about you," Danny said, throwing himself into the room's only chair. "They are saying you got shot with a full-power plasma rifle and just kept fighting like nothing happened." "That is what happened," Jake said quietly. He did not understand why everyone was making such a big deal about it. Pain was pain. You felt it, you dealt with it, and you moved on. "But Jake," Lisa said, sitting on the edge of his bed, "do you understand how impossible that should be? I talked to some of the other cadets. A Draknari who got hit in the arm during the same exercise was screaming and rolling on the ground. His natural armor is 10 times thicker than human skin." Jake shrugged. "Maybe Draknari are not used to pain." "None of them are used to pain like that," Danny said. "That is the point. The weapons are designed to cause so much pain that any species will be forced to stop fighting. But you just walked it off." A soft chime sounded from Jake's communication device. The message light was blinking with an urgent signal. Jake activated the device and saw that he had been requested to report to the medical center immediately. "Probably just want to check that I am okay," Jake said, pulling on a clean uniform shirt. The movement made his chest ache, but he ignored it. The medical center was located in the central hub of the station, a gleaming facility that looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a hospital. Jake had never been inside before, and he was impressed by the advanced equipment that filled every room. Dr. Yith Solis was waiting for him in examination room 7. The alien doctor was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal. Light moved through her body in slow waves, creating patterns that were beautiful and strange at the same time. "Please sit on the examination table," she said in a voice that sounded like singing wind chimes. "I need to run some tests to understand what happened today." Jake sat down and waited as the doctor activated various scanners and sensors around the room. Beams of light passed over his body and displays showed readouts that meant nothing to him. Your physical structure is completely normal for a human, Dr. Ythsalis said after several minutes of scanning. No genetic modifications, no cybernetic enhancements, no biological abnormalities. Yet you absorbed an energy discharge that should have incapacitated you immediately. It hurt, Jake said honestly, but not enough to make me stop fighting. The doctor made notes on her datapad, her crystal fingers moving in patterns that created small musical sounds. Tell me about your species' relationship with pain. How do humans typically respond to injury? Jake thought about it. We try to keep going if we can. My father always told me that you can do anything for 10 minutes if you have to. The pain goes away eventually, but giving up lasts forever. Fascinating, the doctor murmured. Most species treat pain as a critical survival signal that must be obeyed immediately. The idea of choosing to ignore it is almost incomprehensible to us. She showed Jake a holographic display of his nervous system during the plasma hit. Look at this. When the energy struck you, your pain receptors activated normally. Your brain registered the injury and the associated discomfort, but then something remarkable happened. The display zoomed in on Jake's brain activity. Your consciousness actively suppressed the pain signals and maintained operational control. Your species has developed the ability to override your own survival instincts through willpower alone. Jake did not think it was that remarkable. Do not other species do that? No, Dr. Ythsalis said simply. They do not. Pain tolerance varies between individuals and species, but the concept of consciously choosing to ignore severe discomfort is unique to humans, as far as we know. As Jake left the medical center, he found that word of his examination had already spread through the Academy's gossip network. Cadets from dozens of different species stopped to stare at him as he walked through the corridors. Some looked curious, others seemed frightened, and a few appeared impressed. In the cafeteria, Jake joined Danny and Lisa at their usual table. The room was much quieter than normal, and Jake noticed that many conversations stopped when he walked by. This is getting weird, he said, sitting down with his food tray. It is about to get weirder, Lisa said, nodding toward the entrance. Look who just walked in. Commander Vex Thal entered the cafeteria, followed by several other senior instructors. The massive insectoid officer rarely appeared in the cadet dining areas. His presence meant something important was happening. The commander approached Jake's table directly. Every cadet in the room turned to watch. Cadet Morrison, Commander Vex Thal said, his clicking voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. I need to speak with you. Please come with me. Jake followed the commander out of the cafeteria and down a series of corridors he had never seen before. They ended up in a small office that was clearly designed for private conversations. Sit, the commander said, settling his insectoid bulk into a chair designed for his species. What happened today in the simulation has created quite a stir among the faculty. I just did what I had to do, sir, Jake said. Yes, but the way you did it challenges everything we thought we knew about human capabilities. Tell me, are all humans able to function normally after absorbing that level of neural trauma? Jake considered the question. I think so, sir. We are taught from a young age that sometimes you have to push through pain to accomplish important things. Sports, military training, hard work. All of these things hurt sometimes, but we do them anyway. Commander Vex Thal's compound eyes seemed to focus more intently on Jake. On my homeworld we have a saying. The warrior who feels no pain is the most dangerous of all. We always assumed it was metaphorical. Pain is just information, sir. It tells you that something is wrong, but it does not have to control what you do about it. The commander made a note on his datapad. I am going to recommend that you be moved to advanced combat training. Your performance today, combined with what we are learning about human psychology, suggests that your species may have military applications we had not previously considered. Jake felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Advanced training meant more difficult exercises, stronger opponents, and higher expectations. There is something else, the commander continued. Word of today's events has reached Galactic Defense Command headquarters. For the first time in Academy history, they are specifically requesting more human cadets for the next class. Because of what I did? Because of what your entire species might be capable of. If humans can routinely overcome pain and injury that would disable other species, you represent a significant tactical advantage in prolonged combat situations. Jake left the meeting with his head spinning. All he had done was refuse to quit when something hurt. He had no idea that such a simple thing could change how the galaxy saw his entire species. Over the next few days, Jake noticed that his relationships with other cadets began to change. Some treated him with new respect, seeking his advice on how to handle pain and discomfort. Others seemed wary of him, as if his ability to ignore pain made him somehow dangerous or unpredictable. The Vorthak warriors he had defeated in the simulation approached him during combat practice. Their massive forms blocked out the light as they stood around him. "We wish to understand," the larger one said in carefully pronounced common language. "How does your species learn to master pain?" Jake thought about growing up on Earth, about football practice in the summer heat, about his father making him finish yard work even when his hands were blistered, about his mother telling him that strength came from doing hard things when you did not want to do them. "We practice," he said simply. "Every day in small ways we choose to do difficult things. By the time we face something really hard, we already know we can handle it." The Vorthak warriors nodded slowly, as if this explanation made sense to them. As Jake prepared for bed that night, he realized that his life at the academy was never going to be the same. He was no longer just another human cadet trying to prove he belonged here. He had become a symbol of something larger, a representative of human resilience that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. 3 weeks after the simulation incident, Jake found himself sitting in a sterile white room with Lisa and Danny. Dr. Yith Salas had asked all 3 human cadets to participate in what she called voluntary research studies. The doctor wanted to understand if Jake's pain tolerance was normal for humans or if he was somehow special. "I still think this is a bad idea," Lisa said, looking nervously at the various machines and sensors that filled the room. "What if they find out we are all freaks compared to the rest of the galaxy?" "We are not freaks," Danny replied. "We are just different. Besides, this could help other humans who want to join the academy." Jake remained quiet. He was curious about the tests himself. Growing up, he had always assumed that everyone dealt with pain the same way he did. His father had taught him to push through discomfort, but Jake thought all fathers taught their children the same lessons. Dr. Yith Salas entered the room carrying a data pad and several strange devices that Jake did not recognize. Her crystal skin was glowing brighter than usual, which Jake had learned meant she was excited about something. "Thank you all for volunteering," she said. "I want to assure you that these tests are completely safe. We will gradually increase discomfort levels and monitor your responses. You can stop at any time if you need to." The first test was simple. Each human cadet placed their hand on a metal plate that could heat up slowly. The idea was to see how long they could keep their hand there as the temperature increased. Jake went first. The plate started cool and comfortable, then began to warm up. After a few minutes, it was hot enough to be uncomfortable. After 10 minutes, it was painful. Jake kept his hand there anyway, focusing on his breathing the way his football coach had taught him. "Remarkable," Dr. Yith Salas murmured, watching her instruments. "The temperature has reached a level that would force most species to withdraw immediately. How do you feel?" "It hurts," Jake said honestly. "But not enough to make me stop." He kept his hand on the plate for another 5 minutes before the doctor asked him to stop. She did not want to risk actual injury. Lisa and Danny both performed similarly, lasting much longer than the doctor had expected. The second test involved electrical stimulation. Small electrodes were attached to their arms, delivering controlled shocks that increased in intensity. Again, all 3 humans lasted far longer than Dr. Yith Salas had predicted based on data from other species. "This is incredible," the doctor said, reviewing her readings. "Your nervous systems are registering the pain normally, but your conscious minds are simply choosing not to respond to it." The third test was the most interesting. It involved solving mathematical problems while experiencing various forms of discomfort. The doctor wanted to see if humans could maintain mental function while in pain. Jake found himself working on complex equations while standing on a surface that vibrated uncomfortably and listening to sounds that were designed to be annoying. The combination was deeply unpleasant, but he could still think clearly enough to solve the problems. Most species show a significant drop in cognitive function when experiencing discomfort, Dr. Ythsalis explained. Their brains become focused on the source of pain and cannot concentrate on other tasks. But you three are performing as well, as you would under normal conditions. After the formal tests were complete, the doctor sat down with the three humans to discuss the results. I have been studying alien biology for over 30 years, she said. I have never encountered anything like what you just demonstrated. Your species has developed a unique relationship with pain and discomfort. She showed them a holographic display comparing human responses to those of other species. The differences were dramatic. Where other aliens showed immediate and strong reactions to pain, the human responses were much more controlled. Can you help me understand how this developed? Dr. Ythsalis asked. What in your evolutionary history would have created this trait? Lisa spoke up first. Humans evolved on a dangerous planet. Our ancestors had to hunt animals that were bigger and stronger than they were. Sometimes they had to chase these animals for hours or even days until the prey was too tired to fight back. Persistence hunting, Danny added. My anthropology professor talked about it. Early humans would literally run their prey to death over long distances. You cannot do that if you stop every time your feet hurt or your lungs burn. Jake thought about his own family history. My grandfather used to tell stories about working in coal mines. The conditions were terrible, but the workers had to keep going to feed their families. He said the mine was full of pain, but the mine also had the coal, so you went into the pain to get what you needed. Dr. Ythsalis was taking detailed notes. So your species learned to associate enduring discomfort with survival and success. Pain became something to overcome rather than something to avoid. I guess so, Jake said. We have sayings about it. No pain, no gain. What does not kill you makes you stronger. Pain is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. Fascinating. Most species have sayings that encourage avoiding unnecessary discomfort. The idea of deliberately seeking out painful experiences to build character is almost incomprehensible to us. The doctor's findings were compiled into a report that was sent directly to Galactic Defense Command headquarters. Within days, Jake and his fellow humans received new orders. They were being transferred to the Academy's Advanced Research Program, where their unique abilities could be studied in more detail. The news created mixed reactions among the other cadets. Some were jealous that the humans were receiving special attention. Others were relieved that they would not have to compete directly with beings who seemed immune to pain. Commander Vexthal called Jake to his office again to discuss the transfer. The research division wants to understand if human pain tolerance can be taught to other species, the commander explained. They also want to explore the tactical implications of having soldiers who can function normally under conditions that would disable others. What does that mean for us, sir? It means you will be pioneers, the first humans to participate in advanced multi-species combat training. Your performance will determine whether more humans are recruited for specialized military roles. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was not just representing himself anymore. His actions would influence the future of human participation in galactic defense. The advanced training facility was located in a different section of the station, one that Jake had never seen before. The equipment here was more sophisticated, the simulations more realistic, and the other cadets more experienced. On his first day, Jake met cadets from species he had only read about in textbooks. There was a Catherian who could manipulate gravity fields with her mind, a Zephyrian whose body could change shape to fit through tiny spaces, and a Sentinel whose cybernetic implants gave him superhuman reflexes. So you are the human who does not feel pain, the Sentinel said when Jake introduced himself. His voice was mechanically enhanced, giving it an odd echo. I feel pain, Jake corrected. I just do not let it stop me from doing my job. Same thing, the Sentinel replied. In combat, the ability to ignore injury is more valuable than any weapon. The training exercises in the advanced program were designed to push every cadet to their absolute limits. Jake found himself in scenarios that would have been impossible in basic training. He was shot, burned, frozen, and subjected to sonic attacks that made his ears ring for hours. Through it all, he kept fighting. Not because he was brave or special, but because stopping never occurred to him as an option. When something hurt, you dealt with it and moved on. That was just how humans worked. Word of his performance continued to spread beyond the academy. Military commanders throughout the galaxy began requesting detailed reports on human capabilities. Some wanted to recruit humans for their own forces. Others wanted to develop training programs based on human techniques. Jake realized that he had accidentally started something much bigger than himself. By simply refusing to quit when things hurt, he had opened a door that would change how the galaxy viewed his entire species. 6 months after his first day at the academy, Jake found himself standing in the equipment bay preparing for the final examination. The test was called the 72-hour trial, and it was designed to be the hardest challenge any cadet would face during their training. The trial would take place on Kepler 442c, a moon with conditions so harsh that most species could only survive there for a few hours without environmental suits. The atmosphere was thin. The temperature swung from burning hot during the day to freezing cold at night, and the terrain was filled with sharp rocks and dangerous crevices. Jake checked his gear one more time. He had a basic environmental suit, emergency rations for 3 days, water purification tablets, a small shelter that could protect one person, and a communicator for emergencies only. Using the communicator except for life-threatening situations would result in automatic failure. His team for the trial consisted of 5 cadets from different species. There was Zex Kala, the Draknari female who had doubted him on the first day. She had become one of his closest friends over the past months, though she would never admit it publicly. Then there was Findus, a floating ethereal whose jellyfish-like body could survive in almost any environment. Next was Quintor, a young Vorthak warrior who looked up to Jake ever since hearing about the simulation fight. There was also Yemsil, a tiny but brilliant Kithan, whose species was known for their problem-solving abilities. Finally, there was Chen Ka, a sentinel whose cybernetic enhancements made him incredibly strong and fast. Commander Vexthal addressed all the teams before they departed for the moon. This trial will test everything you have learned. You must work together to survive for 72 hours in one of the most hostile environments in this system. The teams that succeed will graduate with honors. Those that fail will repeat their final year. The transport ship dropped Jake's team on a rocky plateau just as the moon's sun was setting. The sky turned from pale yellow to deep purple, and the temperature immediately began to drop. Within an hour, it would be cold enough to kill anyone not properly protected. "We need shelter," Chenka said, his mechanical voice cutting through the thin air. "My sensors show the temperature will reach -40 degrees before morning." The team quickly set up their individual shelters in a circle, with the center space clear for a small heating unit they had been provided. The shelters were designed for one person each, but they could share the heating unit's warmth if they stayed close together. As the temperature dropped, Jake noticed that his teammates were having trouble with the cold. Zexkala's reptilian body was designed for warm climates, and she was shivering despite her insulated suit. Findus had pulled his jellyfish-like form into a tight ball to conserve heat. Even Chen Ka, with all his mechanical enhancements, was moving more slowly as the cold affected his systems. Jake felt the cold too, but it was just another form of discomfort to push through. He had grown up in Minnesota, where winter temperatures often dropped well below freezing. This felt familiar. "The heating unit is not working properly," Yemsil announced, her small hands shaking as she examined the device. "It is only producing about half the heat it should." The team looked at each other with worry. Without proper heating, some of them might not survive the night. The emergency communicators would save their lives, but using them meant failing the trial. "We can share body heat," Jake said. "If we take turns staying awake to monitor the heater and move around to keep warm, we can make it through the night." "Easy for you to say," Zexkala muttered through chattering teeth. "Humans are adapted for cold weather. Some of us are not. Then, we adapt, Jake said simply. We find a way to make it work. Jake took the first watch, staying awake while the others tried to sleep. He kept the heating unit running as efficiently as possible, and made sure everyone stayed close enough to share what warmth it provided. When Quintor started shivering too violently to sleep, Jake gave him extra insulation from his own gear. Why? Do you help me? Quintor asked in his deep, rumbling voice. We are competitors here. We are teammates, Jake corrected. We succeed together or we fail together. The first night was the hardest. By morning, everyone was exhausted and cold, but they had all survived. As the sun rose, the temperature began to climb rapidly. Soon it was uncomfortably hot, and they had to deal with the opposite problem. The second day brought new challenges. Their water purification system malfunctioned, leaving them with barely enough clean water for 1 day instead of 3. Yemsil had injured her leg falling into a hidden crevice, and she could barely walk. Findus was having trouble with the thin atmosphere, which made it hard for his species to maintain their normal floating ability. Jake found himself taking on more and more of the team's burden. He carried extra water, helped Yemsil walk across difficult terrain, and took longer watches so others could rest. When Zexkala's environmental suit developed a leak that let in the harsh atmosphere, Jake spent 4 hours in the brutal heat patching it with materials from his own gear. You are going to exhaust yourself, Chenka warned as Jake worked on the suit repair. Sweat was pouring down Jake's face and his hands were shaking from the heat. I am fine, Jake said, though he was anything but fine. The heat was making him dizzy and his chest still ached from where he had been shot months ago. But Zexkala needed the suit fixed, so he kept working. By the end of the second day, Jake was running on pure determination. He had given most of his water to teammates who needed it more, shared his food with those who had lost theirs, and slept less than anyone else. His body was telling him to stop, to rest, to use the emergency communicator and end this trial. Instead, he kept going. The third night was when everything went wrong at once. A storm moved in, bringing winds that threatened to tear apart their shelters. The heating unit finally died completely, leaving them with no protection from the cold. Yemsil's injury had gotten worse, and she was developing a fever. Findus was barely conscious, struggling to survive in the thin, turbulent air. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He dismantled his own shelter and used the materials to reinforce the others. He gave his thermal blanket to Yemsil and his backup heating pack to Findus. Then he spent the night in the open, with nothing but his environmental suit to protect him from the freezing wind and stinging debris. Chenka found him the next morning, curled up against a rock formation, covered in ice and barely moving. Jake, are you alive? The sentinel asked, his mechanical voice filled with concern. Jake opened his eyes and looked up at his teammate. His lips were blue, his hands were numb, and he could barely feel his feet. But he was alive. Is everyone else okay? Jake asked. Yes, because of what you did. The storm is over. We only have to survive 12 more hours. Jake nodded and slowly got to his feet. His body screamed in protest, every muscle aching from the cold and exhaustion. But 12 hours was nothing. He could do anything for 12 hours. When the rescue ships arrived to pick up the teams, Jake's group was the only one where every member had survived the full 72 hours without using their emergency communicators. Other teams had lost members to the harsh conditions, and several had been forced to call for early rescue. Commander Vexthal was waiting when they returned to the academy. He looked at Jake, who was wrapped in blankets and could barely stand, and nodded with approval. Outstanding performance, Cadet Morrison. Your team's success rate was unprecedented. Thank you, sir, Jake said through chattering teeth. But it was a team effort. No, Zexkala said, speaking up for the first time since their return. It was Jake. He gave everything he had to keep the rest of us alive. I have never seen anything like it. At the graduation ceremony 2 weeks later, Commander Vexthal addressed the assembled cadets and their families watching through holographic transmission. This year we learned something important about our human allies. They do not possess superior technology or overwhelming physical strength. Instead, they carry something far more valuable: the ability to endure, to persist, and to sacrifice for others even when facing impossible conditions. Jake stood with his graduating class wearing the insignia of the Galactic Defense Fleet. In the viewing gallery, he could see his parents watching with pride. His father gave him a thumbs up and mouthed the familiar words that had guided Jake through every challenge. "You can do anything for 10 minutes. Jake smiled back, knowing that he and his fellow humans had proven they could do much more than that. As he looked around at his alien classmates, he realized that something had changed in how they saw him and his species. The doubt and skepticism were gone, replaced by respect and even admiration. The galaxy was beginning to understand what Earth had always known. Sometimes the strongest armor was not made of metal or energy shields. Sometimes it was made of simple, stubborn determination to keep moving forward, no matter what tried to stop you. Jake had walked off a plasma bolt hit like it was nothing, and in doing so had changed how an entire galaxy viewed humanity. Not bad for a cadet who just refused to quit when things got tough.